Hello, and welcome to the Three Questions podcast, where we dive deep into the world of wealth management and connect you with industry experts. I'm your host, Wayne Baxter, Senior Executive Manager at One Capital Management. Now, whether you're a business owner, a professional, or simply someone looking to secure your family's financial future, today's episode could be the key to your peace of mind. Our topic: the three questions you should ask before implementing an asset protection strategy. Thank you for taking time to check us out. And if you enjoy this episode of the Three Questions podcast, please consider liking this video and subscribing to our podcast and YouTube channels. In today's litigious society, even individuals with no fault can find themselves defendants in lawsuits. Then there are the slip and the fall accidents, dog bites, car accidents. You could be named in a lawsuit even if your employee causes harm to a customer while on the job. Or, now this is a scary one, what if you post a factual but potentially sensitive statement on social media, which is misinterpreted by someone who feels defamed? There are plenty of other examples of how you could find yourself exposed to unwanted litigation. And Hillel Presser is here with us. He is the managing partner and attorney at law with Boca Raton, Florida-based Presser Law Firm. PA Hillel represents individuals and businesses in connection with establishments of comprehensive asset protection plans that incorporate both domestic and international components. He's joined us today to address the three questions you should ask before implementing an asset protection strategy. Hillel, thank you for making time to join us today. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, it's been long awaited. We had you scheduled once before, and we had a bit of a glitch in the calendar. So I'm glad we were able to get you back in, and we're looking forward to getting the folks here to share all the experience that you're going to provide us today, or at least enjoy it. Now, here's something we talked about. You're actually originally from not Rochester, New York.
Yeah, I am. I actually grew up, the first half of my life in upstate New York in Rochester.
Right across the wall, right. Lived for many years in Toronto, Ontario. I think there used to even be, believe it or not, between Rochester and Toronto, there used to be a ferry that crossed Lake Ontario so that folks could go back. And I don't think it's there anymore. So we're actually back then not that far away from each other. And you went to Syracuse.
Yeah, so growing up, we used to go to
Okay.
Niagara
Okay.
Falls. We used to go to Toronto, and after Rochester, I went to Syracuse for undergrad.
So my good friend here, Jared Cook, who's the person who makes all of this work and hum, along with Kira Kane over here. Jared is also alumni of Syracuse. So when you said Syracuse, both of his arms went up in the air like the Orangeman. Was it the Orangeman, right? Syracuse.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if he's a big fan, but I'm actually heading up there tomorrow. I was very good friends with a lot of the former basketball players. So I'll be seeing them while I'm up there. So tell him we can chat offline anytime he
Right
wants.
on. Well, after we get done the recording, maybe we'll have to have an alumni get together here. Small world. See the people you meet when you're on the Three Questions podcast, Jared. You tied your wagon to a good horse. That's all I'm going to tell you. Okay, now before we get to the three questions, we actually talked about this before, but I would really like, Hillel, for you to talk a little bit about your firm and how you, like, asset protection strategy. I mean, this isn't something I don't think people, in high school or maybe even in Syracuse University think about as a profession. So I'd really be interested in you guys kind of give us a little bit of an overview of the firm and also this whole idea of how you got involved in asset protection.
Absolutely. So, going back a long time, and I won't date myself, but as long as I can remember, if you would have asked me when I was a kid what I was going to be, I would have told you hands down I was going to be a lawyer. So at 10 years old, I knew I was going to be a
Hmm.
lawyer. And it probably had something to do with the fact that back then I was very close with my Uncle Jimmy. And every summer and vacation, I went and worked for Uncle Jimmy. And
Wow.
while I knew him as Uncle Jimmy was one of the first personal injury attorneys to ever advertise on TV.
No
And
way.
he would get on TV and scream at the top of his lungs, Jim the Hammer Shapiro. I'll wring out every penny, squeeze out every dime. You don't have to like me. Just make sure you call me. I may be an SOB, but I'm your SOB. In fact,
I
my
love
favorite
it.
ad, my favorite ad is where his face popped out of the zero of the 1-800 number. And,
Was
growing
this
up,
in
I
was this
loved,
in Rochester?
so this was upstate New York, Rochester, Syracuse, Buffalo, and this was 40 years ago. Today, this is the norm.
I'm going to look
Every
these
bus
up. I bet
bench,
you they're on YouTube. I wonder if those ads are on YouTube. That's cool.
every bus bench today is who can I sue? Every radio ad, who can I sue? Every TV ad, who can I sue? How do I take the money out of the hardworking people? So growing up, I loved business and I loved law. And I said to myself, you know what? There's hundreds, if not thousands, of attorneys in every city trying to take your money. I
100%.
thought it would be pretty neat to be one of only a few in the entire country that teach you how to protect it. So I joke and I say I am the lawyer that hates lawyers.
That is awesome. Um, okay, you know what? For those who are listening in today, I'm gonna wager here that this is the first time, like you said, there's very few, they've really ever heard of anyone mention the term asset protection strategy. So for their benefit, if only for their benefit, perhaps you could give us a brief tutorial. What is it and why implement one? Just the Cliff Notes, or we used to say back in Toronto, the Coles Notes version of the topic.
It's just like when you interview someone, right? Tell me your whole life in 2 minutes, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
pretty
I,
much.
I get it. So listen, people work their entire life to give their kids a better lives, retire, live a better life, give to charity, whatever the reason is. But unfortunately, we live in a very litigious, frivolous society where one lawsuit can take everything away. And you don't even have to be doing anything. Maybe one of your teenage kids is driving your car, unfortunately gets in an accident, and then you get sued because you own the car. So, what we do is we always tell people we will not make you one penny richer. It is our job to make sure that you don't become one penny poorer. So I don't care what the client invests in. I don't care if they're a school teacher or a billionaire. But what we do is we help them take their chips off the table and we help them become as uncollectible and judgment proof as possible. So if they're sued, they don't lose what they worked so hard for and they don't have to start over. And of course, like any planning, it shouldn't be looked at, alone on an island. Although people come to us from all across the country for asset protection, we always make sure that that's why they come. But when they leave, I make sure they have an integrated plan. So, what I mean by that is while you're alive, take your chips off the table, become as uncollectible and judgment proof as possible. However, when you pass away, make sure that your assets go where you want them to go quickly, privately, and less taxes and less lawyer fees.
You know, and just on that note, just as a segue completely off, our next episode is on, we're interviewing a private investigator who finds those assets that are lost. So we're actually having that right after this
Well,
episode. So it's like yours this week, and the next week is going to be. We are actually talking to a private investigator who specializes in finding either in beneficiaries or assets that can't be found. So to your point, making sure that they're hideable while they're alive and findable when they pass away.
well, Wayne, you bring up a great issue. We don't ever hide assets. So I can tell anybody what I have and where it is. They just can't collect it. So asset
Noted.
protection should never be about hiding or secrecy. I tell every
Fair
one of
enough.
my clients, presume at some point if you get sued and you lose and you're under oath, you have to disclose what you have. So I can tell everybody what you have and where it is. They just can't get to it. So never rely on the hiding or secrecy. If someone's telling you to do that,
Noted.
run the other way.
So, in addition to, advising clients, you appear on radio, on television networks. You've also authored several books on asset protection strategy, a couple in particular, Asset Protection Secrets and Financial Self-Defense. You want to just maybe give the folks a little bit of an overview of these last two books that you've written on this topic?
Sure. Yeah. So the two books, Financial Self-Defense and Asset Protection Secrets, I always say they're both phenomenal because I wrote them. Just joking. Um, But in reality, the difference is Financial Self-Defense. That's a great book for someone who has a few hours, can read it cover to cover, and really wants to learn about the subject. Asset Protection Secrets, I wrote that one all Q&A. And the reason I did that is you literally can flip to one chapter, how do I protect my home or how do I protect my investments? And in 2 minutes, you can read a few Q&As and learn something. So that's why I did the two different books. And, Wayne is, if any of your listeners want to learn more about asset protection, if they go to our website, as long as they mention your show, I'm happy to send them complimentary copies.
That's awesome. Great. And by the way, just on that note, we have your name at the bottom of the screen. So for those folks that are watching, they'll be able to take the information right off the screen. At the end of at the end of the podcast, I'm going to give you a chance to give out your website and all that information. So today we're discussing the 3 questions you should ask before implementing an asset protection strategy. And I say, hello, we get right to the questions. So question number one, what are some of the common misconceptions about asset protection strategies?
Sure. Um, there's tons of them. I'll talk to you just about the most three that I see every single day. Number one is, hey, I don't have enough where it warrants protecting my assets. Hey, asset
Hmm.
protection is only for the ultra wealthy. And the answer there is no. In fact, it's the opposite. The school teacher who saved up $300,000, if she gets sued for $1 million, she's wiped out. It's catastrophic. There's no coming back from it. Take one of our professional athlete clients. They sign an NFL deal for $50 million. If they get sued for 5 million, they still have 45 million left. So the fact is, the less you have, the more important asset protection becomes. Obviously, we're not going to do the same plan for a school teacher as we would for an NFL player, but the importance is there regardless of the dollar amount. So I'd say that's probably number one. Number two is every single day, somebody comes into my office and they tell me, Mr. Presser, I'm protected because I have a trust. Now, there are trusts that can protect you. So I'm not saying that all trusts don't protect you, but the majority of trusts that people have, they're called revocable trusts or living trusts.
Right.
Probably 9 out of 10 people who have a trust has a revocable trust or a living trust. And if they're listening now and they don't know what they have, it's revocable or living. And revocable living trusts have 0% asset protection. If you put an asset in there, you can take the asset out, which means if you put an asset in there and you get sued, the judge orders you to take it out. So for some reason, I don't know if the attorneys don't explain it correctly or maybe the clients don't understand it properly, but if somebody has a revocable living trust, it's a great tool for estate planning. Everybody should have one. It's great if you pass away, but from an asset protection point of view, it doesn't give you any asset protection at all.
So
And
with that being said, can I gotta put it out there. Can an asset protection strategy be implemented as a part of the estate plan, or is it completely separate?
you can absolutely do it as an integrated part. I'll give you an example. If you have a brokerage account with $500,000 and a piece of real estate worth $500,000 in your revocable living trust, if you get sued, you lose the $500,000 liquid, you lose the $500,000 real estate. If instead you take those two assets and put them in a protective entity, which we'll talk about later, maybe you put the piece of real estate in an LLC, and maybe you put the liquid assets in a limited partnership, you could then have those entities owned by your revocable trust. And that way you have the best of both worlds. While you're alive, everything's protected in the LLC and the limited partnership. When you pass away, everything's integrated to the estate plan. And by having your revocable living trust own those entities, you get the best of both worlds.
So you can have your revocable living trust set up, but it's just the way you structure those two entities, the real estate and the asset. And when you mention assets, what about people who own shares in a closely held business? Does that still apply as well?
No different. If somebody sues you, anything that you own, you can lose. So if you have money and you get sued, you can lose it. If you have real estate and you get sued, you can lose it. If you have $1 million jewelry collection and you get sued, you can lose it. Well, if you own shares in an S Corp or a C Corp or membership interest in an LLC, no different. So I don't care if it's money, real estate, jewelry, shares in a company, boats, planes, maybe somebody owes you money. If there is something of value, if you own it, you can lose it. And that's why I always tell my clients, own nothing, control everything.
So this leads to the second question, Hillel, and great overview. I am sure there are a lot of people listening today are just eyebrows are has been risen for sure. Um, what are is do you can you qualify or quantify, what is this is question number two. What are the best asset protection strategies? Obviously one that works, but how do you is there a way you can say this strategy is the best strategy, or how do you quantify that or qualify it?
Yeah, first of all, there's so many. I'll talk to you today just about, the top two or three.
Okay.
Um, First of all, my favorite strategy is what I talked about before, using a protective entity. To me, this is the coolest thing in the world. Wayne, just like you and I are different people, we have different social security numbers.
That's
Well,
right.
if I get sued, they don't sue you. And if you get sued, they don't sue me.
Correct.
No different between you and your protective entity. So, protective entities are things you've heard of them. They're like LLCs,
Yep.
limited partnerships,
Mm-hmm.
certain trusts, corporations, et cetera, et cetera. And I'll give you an example. If you have the $500,000 brokerage account in your name, if you get sued, you lose the $500,000 brokerage account. If you instead take the $500,000 brokerage account and put it in a protective entity, let's just say a limited partnership, now if you get sued, it's not yours to lose.
Right.
You and that limited partnership are different people. You have a social security number, the limited partnership has a tax ID number. Two totally different living individuals. No different with real estate. Let's say you have a rental Airbnb. If that rental Airbnb is in your name and you get sued, you can lose it. If instead you take that rental Airbnb and you put it in a protective entity, let's call it an LLC, now if you get sued, you don't own the property, the LLC does. It's not yours to lose.
Hmm.
So the first thing that I love the most is take any asset. I don't care if it's real estate, money, shares in a company, boats, planes, we could go on and on. Take any asset out of your name where it's unprotected and put it into a protective entity where nobody can touch it.
Hmm. No.
Other str-
Okay. Do you have another example, or is that your?
that's one example using protective entities, but there's tons of other strategies. For example, there's exemptions. Well, exemptions are state laws that protect your assets. So, for example, in Florida, your primary home is protected. You can have a $2 million home, you can have a $20 million home, you can have a $200 million home. It's totally protected. In Florida, your retirement accounts are protected. You can have a half a million, 2 million, 50 million. Nobody can take it. In Florida, your life insurance, your cash value, your annuities, your wages, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, they're all protected. So every state has different exemptions. And if they go to our website, they can see the exemptions for every
Right.
single state. But if you take your money and you invest it in exempt assets, it doesn't matter if you get sued, nobody can take them. So in the Florida example, you can be worth $100 million. And if your house is worth 20 million, your retirement account is worth 20 million, your life insurance is worth 20 million, and your annuities are worth 40 million, nobody can take those assets only because you've invested them in exempt assets. So find out in your state, wherever you live, what assets are exempt, and merely by investing in those assets, nobody can touch them if you get sued.
So when I think of asset protection, I'll tell you for myself, I think about a particular client of mine. He works in a very specialized role. He's licensed by the FAA to approve modifications to aircrafts. no one would insure that risk. So we actually, this is long before I met you. We worked with a law firm here in California that set up an asset protection strategy to protect, just like you said, the real estate and and all of his investments. Um, so you're saying that I was thinking in particular that there are other assets that are not liquid. So other pieces of property, they can be protected as well. It doesn't have to be investments. It can be actual, you know, real estate. A real estate asset can be protected using the same strategy or using a strategy.
Yeah, and anything of value can be protected. So, for example, when you talk about a business, right?
Right.
We protect inventory, machinery and equipment, intellectual property, cash and accounts receivables. Going back to the personal side, we protect crypto, we protect inheritances. So it doesn't matter what the asset is, we can make sure it's protected.
Okay. So the last question, question number three, the three questions you should ask before implementing an asset protection strategy. Again, we got Hillel Presser joining us from beautiful, and I've been there, beautiful Boca Raton, Florida. It's a beautiful place to live. Uh,
Although very hot in the summer.
in the summer. Well,
I'd
it's
rather
funny,
I'd rather be in Rochester or Toronto.
fair, but I will tell you, it's interesting you bring this up because I was just talking to somebody who had moved from the Midwest
Yeah.
down to Boca Raton a few years ago, and I asked him. I said, "What about the summer?" And he said to me, he said, "I just got back from there, back from home," and he said it was 101 degrees there with humidity. He said, "At least in Boca, I'm close to the water." So on that note, so question number three on the podcast today: is it possible to establish an asset protection strategy for non-US or international property? This is relevant, of course, because as you know, a lot of my clients are cross-border clients. They are expat Canadians that have relocated to the US or US residents who have moved to Canada. So interested in your thoughts on that question.
Yeah, absolutely. So, we do both full domestic and international asset protection. In fact, I helped rewrite some of the laws for one of the international asset protection jurisdictions. And you can use international asset protection entities, sometimes they're trusts, sometimes they're foreign LLCs, things of that nature, to protect international assets as well. So, whether it's international real estate, international companies, you can even use international structures to give more protection to US based assets.
Hmm.
So for example, you can have brokerage accounts that maybe in the US you can only get 85, 90, 95% protected, and you can use that same US asset but have international structures protect the US asset, and I'll never say 100%, but 99.9% with a bar over it. But the short answer is yes. It doesn't matter if the asset is US based or international. You absolutely can protect it. We do international asset protection structures all the time.
So on that note, if you're using an international, if you're a U.S. tax reporter, you have to report to the IRS. Do those assets that have that international structure are they now subject to an FBAR that to report to
Yeah.
the
Well, you know a lawyer's favorite answer. It depends,
It
right?
depends, of course,
So,
yes.
so I say that because it depends on what type of entity are you setting up. Is it a disregarded entity for tax purposes? Is it a trust? What jurisdiction are you using? Hey, have you funded the trust? Have you not funded the trust? So there's a lot of variations that go into reporting, but the most important thing to understand is that you always must report. You don't ever want to do anything like we talked about earlier today, hiding or secrecy. Anytime I set up an international entity, I get a US tax ID number because I want the IRS, I want the government to know we are not trying to do anything at all to defraud them. We're not doing any tax games here. Everything's tax neutral. Even if you make money, even if you don't bring it back to the US, you got to report it. You got to pay taxes on it the year it's earned, not when it's brought back. So very, very, very important that you're following all the proper reporting requirements. If not, you can end up in a lot of trouble.
I Yes. Okay. Before I have just a thought here. I highlighted a broad range of instances where an asset protection strategy will work. Are there any instances where they won't?
Yeah.
Can you think of a scenario where somebody came to you and you said, "Look, I can't help you."
Yeah. I unfortunately turn down clients all the time. I turned down a client the other day, excuse me, because I felt that there was probably some sort of criminal investigation going on. You can't rob a 7-Eleven and take your $30,000 and protect it. So um,
Makes perfect sense.
you know
Yeah.
you got you got to make sure everything you're doing is legal and ethical. That's number one. Number two, you got to be proactive. So I always tell people you buy car insurance before the accident.
Right.
You buy health insurance before you get
You
sick.
get asset
You buy
protection
life
strategy before you're
insurance
sued.
before you die. So I'm not saying that you can't do anything after you get sued, but
Makes
you have a lot more remedies available to you if you protect yourself proactively. Don't wait until the death car accident happens and then call the asset protection attorney 6 months later. And then lastly, I always tell people honor thy structure. So, what do I mean by that? I could set up the best asset protection plan in the world, but if you don't follow it, it means nothing. So, if I set up an LLC for you to own a piece of real estate, well, when income comes in, you got to put it in that LLC.
got it.
When you pay the mortgage and the insurance and the taxes, you got to pay it from the LLC. If you don't honor your structure and you start commingling everything, well, if you ever get sued and you're in front of a judge is going to look you in the eye and say, wait a minute, you didn't honor your structure. Why should I honor your structure?
Good question. I got one for you. I have a lot of people say, "Well, I've already got an asset protection strategy. I have umbrella insurance." I'm sure you've heard that. I'm willing to bet, yeah, for sure.
Only every day.
Yeah, I just figured as much. So when you hear that, what is your sort of organic pat response to that?
Yeah. I mean, look, if somebody already has a plan, I think it's great. But guess what? Every year, assets change. Every year, laws change. So hopefully, you're going to your doctor for a physical. Go to your asset protection attorney for a financial physical. That's number one. Number two is I love insurance. I tell my clients it's cheap, it helps you sleep at night. But understand something. Insurance companies are one of the most profitable industries in the world.
For a
If you go to the
reason.
big if you go to the big cities, their names are on all the big buildings, and that's not because they pay every claim. The majority of lawsuits aren't covered by insurance. I had a property down here. Someone claimed they got sick from mold. I had a $10 million policy, and they pointed me to page 25 in 4-point font where mold was capped at $10,000. And then I remembered what my dad said growing up. He would say, son, the big print giveth, the small print taketh
Take it
away.
away.
Also, what if your coverage is inadequate? You have a 500,000 in coverage, you get sued for 1 million, you got to come out of
Oopsie.
pocket the rest. And what if your insurance company goes bankrupt? Now, if I said this 5, 10 years ago, you kick me out of here. We get a bad storm these days in Florida. I bet you some of the insurance companies get wiped out. So look, I like insurance, but don't solely rely on it. You need different layers, different firewalls, belt and suspenders.
I got one last thing I was thinking about. I have my personal injury attorney friends, and I have a few as well. And they talk about lawsuits, and they say, yeah, one of the things that we look at, not just what they already own, but also future earnings. Is that something in an asset protection strategy? Because it isn't owned yet, but future earnings, is that something that's sort of up beyond your bandwidth?
No, I mean, there's things you could do to make sure that the future looks bright. And you actually bring up a whole nother issue. Another strategy is poverty is power. It is cool to look poor. What's the first thing a lawyer does before he sues you? He looks you up and he wants
100%.
to know if you're a good candidate for a lawsuit. So
Absolutely.
what's $100,000 Mercedes worth if you own 95,000? What's $1 million house worth if you own 950,000? There are ways to put enforceable liens, mortgages, encumbrances over your assets. It's called equity stripping. So if somebody sues you, they're not first in line.
Okay. I really enjoyed this. I've been looking forward to this podcast for literally months. So have not disappointed here. Before we wrap up, because is there just one piece of advice you would give to anyone who's listening or watching and is wondering, what they should be thinking about it? If they wondering if they should consider an asset protection strategy, like, is there anything you would say to that listener or someone
Yeah.
watching today?
I mean, look, numbers don't lie. Okay. Um, there's 100 million lawsuits every single year. That number's only growing. Lawsuits have literally become the next biggest business. They know that when they're driving down the highway and they see the billboards or hear the radio and TV. There's a 1 in 4 chance you'll get sued in the next 12 months. There's a 50% chance of divorce. You're 7 times more likely to face a lawsuit than get in a car accident. So we could keep spitting out numbers. Here's what I tell every one of my clients. You spend a lifetime making money. One lawsuit, even if you do nothing, can take it away. Here's the answer. For every 60 minutes you spend making money, stop. Spend 60 seconds thinking about how to protect it.
I will agree with you on the litigious nature of here in the U.S. I'm from Canada, as you know, and when we first moved down here, my son got bitten by the neighbor's dog, and never dawned on us. We said, he was probably being, himself and provoked the dog. But I remember how nervous the neighbors were, and we just blew it off. But, nah, don't worry about it. It's a couple stitches, he's fine. But, I remember talking to people afterwards that were saying, maybe. So then last night, get this, last night, it was late, doing groceries. I leave the grocery store and I have one of those little carts, not the big carts. I have the little cart. And I'm going out to my car, straight line across the parking lot, and there's this uneven part, and I go right over top of I go right over top of the shopping cart and cut my leg. And I get home, and my wife takes a look at it. She says, "Do you think we should sue?" My wife, the Canadian, I couldn't believe it. I was like, I went, I don't know. I don't think so. But I mean, it was just like I couldn't believe this. Someone who never ever would have thought of a lawsuit ever in her life.
Yeah.
The first thing she didn't say, "Wow, you need to get some polysporin on that." She was like, "Do you think we should?" So to
When,
your
when I
point,
well, I speak, 50, 100 times a year all across the country. And I always love to end when I'm speaking in person. I always give them the 10 craziest lawsuits I've ever seen.
I bet. Well, that's maybe a second. That could be another podcast. Okay, for those who are watching on the website, like I said earlier, we've included all your information on the screen. They can see how to get a hold of you, and if they get a hold of you, you'll give them a free copies of your book, which is great. But we have a lot of people who are listening. So maybe you could tell us what is the best way for them to contact you and not only just ask you for maybe your advice or your suggestion, but maybe even get a copy or two of your books.
Yeah, the best thing is really just go to our website. It's www.assetprotectionattorneys.com. That's www.assetprotectionattorneys.com. And again, as long as they mention your show, I'm happy to give them complimentary copies of the book and even a complimentary preliminary consultation if they would
That's
like.
awesome. Oh, wow. Well, Hillel, I want to tell you how much I've enjoyed this. Honest to God, great conversation. Not only that, educational and informative, and I'm sure the folks listening in today really appreciated it. So thank you very much for taking time and making yourself available today. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Right. Hillel Presser is a managing partner and attorney at law with Boca Raton, Florida-based Presser Law Firm, PA. Thanks, Hillel. Take care. I look forward to bringing you the Three Questions podcast, and I hope you find them educational and informative. Please consider liking this video and subscribing to our podcast and YouTube channels. And to receive a notification of when our latest episode has been posted, please click on the notifications bell. Now, lastly, but not least, to schedule an online Zoom consultation with me to discuss your wealth management needs, please click on the link in the description box below, www.onecapital.com/meet with Wayne. Thank you, and we will see you soon.